Margaret Holland stood by the large window in her office and looked down at the busy city streets below. She was the CEO of one of the biggest technology companies in the country, and people respected her everywhere she went. She had built her company from nothing, and now it was worth billions of dollars. But today none of that mattered because her daughter was crying at home, and Margaret felt completely helpless. Her assistant walked into the office with a tablet in her hands, and Margaret already knew what she was going to say. The look on her face said everything. Margaret took a deep breath and waited for the words she had been dreading all week. All of them declined, her assistant said quietly. Every single family sent back the invitations with their regrets. Margaret nodded slowly and turned back to the window. She had sent beautiful invitations to every child in her daughter Lily's class at Westbrook Academy. The invitations were expensive and elegant with gold lettering and small butterflies embossed on the thick paper. She had personally written a note on each one inviting the children to come celebrate Lily's 10th birthday at their estate. The party was planned for this Saturday, and everything was ready. Except for the one thing that actually mattered. No one was coming. Margaret had known this might happen, but she had hoped that maybe, just maybe, some parents would teach their children about kindness and acceptance. She had hoped that someone would see past the wheelchair and notice what an amazing girl her daughter was. Lily was smart and funny and kind. She loved to read and could talk for hours about her favorite books. She was learning to play piano with modified pedals, and she never complained about her condition. She was braver than most adults Margaret knew, but none of that mattered to the other families at Westbrook Academy. 3 years ago, everything had been different. Lily had been a normal 7-year-old girl running and playing and dancing. Then one rainy night, a drunk driver had crashed into their car on the way home from Lily's ballet recital. Margaret had walked away with minor injuries, but Lily had been trapped in the back seat. The doctors had done everything they could, but the damage to her spine was permanent. Lily would never walk again. At first, the other parents had been sympathetic. They sent flowers and cards and promised that their children would stay friends with Lily. But as weeks turned into months, those promises faded away. The playdates stopped getting scheduled. The birthday party invitations stopped coming. When Lily returned to school in her wheelchair, the other children didn't know how to act around her. They were nervous and awkward, and eventually they just started avoiding her completely. Their parents were even worse in Margaret's opinion. They smiled to her face at school events and made polite conversation, but she could see the pity in their eyes. Some of them seemed almost afraid, as if disability was something that might be contagious. Others just seemed uncomfortable, like Lily's presence reminded them of things they didn't want to think about. None of them wanted their perfect children spending time with a girl who was different. Margaret had tried everything. She had talked to the teachers and the principal. She had organized school activities and volunteered for every committee. She had invited families over for dinner and tried to build connections. Nothing worked. The other parents were polite but distant, and their children followed their example. Last month, Lily had asked if she could have a birthday party. Margaret's first instinct was to say no, because she wanted to protect her daughter from more disappointment. But Lily had looked at her with those hopeful eyes and said she wanted to try one more time. She said maybe if the party was really fun and special, the other kids would want to come. She said maybe they just needed another chance to get to know her. Margaret couldn't say no to that kind of hope, even though it broke her heart. So she had planned the most amazing party she could imagine. She had hired caterers and decorators and entertainment. She had rented a bounce house that was wheelchair accessible and hired a magician, and arranged for a petting zoo with baby animals. She had ordered a custom cake from the best bakery in the city, shaped like a castle because Lily loved fairy tales. She had done everything possible to make it perfect, and now no one was coming. Margaret picked up her phone and called home. Her housekeeper answered, and Margaret asked to speak to Lily. There was a pause, and then her daughter's voice came on the line. She sounded small and sad. "Mom?" "Hi, sweetheart," Margaret said, trying to keep her voice steady. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay," Lily said, but Margaret could hear that she wasn't. "Did anyone else RSVP today?" Margaret closed her eyes. She had been hoping to have this conversation in person where she could hold her daughter and comfort her, but Lily deserved honesty. "No, baby," Margaret said softly. "I don't think anyone is going to come." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Margaret could picture her daughter, sitting in her wheelchair probably, in her room surrounded by her books, trying not to cry. "That's okay," Lily finally said. "We can still have cake, right? Just you and me?" Of course we can, Margaret said, and now she was the one trying not to cry. We can do whatever you want. Okay, Lily said. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. Margaret ended the call and sat down at her desk. She had faced boardrooms full of hostile executives and negotiated deals worth millions of dollars. She had fought her way to the top of a male-dominated industry and never backed down from a challenge. But she couldn't fix this. She couldn't make other people see how special her daughter was. She couldn't force children to be kind or parents to teach their kids about acceptance. All she could do was be there for Lily and love her and try to make Saturday as special as possible, even if it was just the two of them. Margaret looked at her calendar and cleared her schedule for the rest of the week. She was going home early today, and she was going to spend every moment until Saturday making sure her daughter knew how loved and valued she was. The world might not see Lily's worth, but Margaret did, and that would have to be enough. She gathered her things and left her office, telling her assistant to cancel all her meetings. As she drove home through the city streets, Margaret made a decision. This would be the last time she let Lily get hurt this way. No more trying to fit in with people who didn't want them. No more hoping for acceptance from families who couldn't see past their own prejudices. From now on, she would protect her daughter's heart, even if it meant building walls around their world. It was better to be alone than to keep reaching out to people who would never reach back. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine and clear blue skies, like the universe was mocking Margaret's mood. She had barely slept the night before, thinking about how to make the day special for Lily. Despite the circumstances, she had decided they would go through with everything as planned because Lily deserved to have a beautiful birthday, even if no one else showed up to celebrate with them. The decorating team had arrived at dawn and transformed the mansion's ballroom into something magical. Pink and gold streamers hung from the ceiling and balloon arches framed the doorways. Long tables covered in white cloths held enough food for 50 children, including pizza and chicken nuggets and fruit platters arranged to look like butterflies. The dessert table was covered with cupcakes and cookies and candy. In the center of it all sat the magnificent castle cake with purple towers and sugar flowers. Everything looked perfect and completely heartbreaking. Lily came downstairs at noon wearing the new dress Margaret had bought her. It was lavender with sparkles on the bodice, and it made Lily's eyes look even more blue than usual. She had insisted on doing her own hair and had pulled it back in a braid with small flowers woven through it. She looked beautiful and brave and so young, sitting in her wheelchair looking at the empty ballroom. "It's really pretty, Mom," Lily said with forced cheerfulness. "You did an amazing job." Margaret knelt down beside her daughter's wheelchair and took her hand. "We can do something else if you want. We could go to the aquarium or the movies. We don't have to stay here." Lily shook her head. "No, you worked really hard on this. Let's have the party anyway." "Just us," so they tried. Margaret wheeled Lily to the main table, and they put on party hats that looked ridiculous and made them both laugh a little. The magician Margaret had hired showed up and performed his show for an audience of 2. He was professional and kind and pretended like nothing was wrong, even though this was clearly the saddest party he had ever worked. The baby animals from the petting zoo arrived, and Lily's face lit up when she got to hold a tiny goat. But between each activity there were long stretches where they just sat there surrounded by decorations and food and the ghost of what this party was supposed to be. Margaret watched her daughter try so hard to be happy and grateful, and it was killing her inside. This was worse than just canceling everything. This was rubbing Lily's face in what she didn't have. At 2:00, Margaret was seriously considering packing everything up and leaving when her head of security approached her. His name was Carlos, and he had worked for the family for 5 years. He looked confused. "Ms. Holland," he said quietly, "there's a boy at the front gate. He says he wants to join the party." Margaret frowned. "What boy? Did someone actually come?" "No, ma'am. He's not from the invitation list. He says he was just passing by and saw the decorations. He's asking if he can come in." Margaret felt anger flash through her. This was some kind of joke. Someone had sent their kid to mock her daughter, or maybe it was one of those influencer pranks where people filmed themselves doing cruel things for views online. "Tell him no," Margaret said coldly. "Tell him this is a private party and he needs to leave." Carlos hesitated. "Ma'am, with respect, I don't think he means any harm. He seems like a genuine kid. He's got a bike and a grocery store uniform on, like he just got off work." Something about that detail made Margaret pause. She looked over at Lily, who was sitting alone at the table, methodically eating a piece of cake with no enthusiasm at all. What did they have to lose at this point? The day couldn't get any worse. "Show me the security camera," Margaret said. Carlos pulled out his tablet and brought up the feed from the front gate. Margaret looked at the screen and saw a boy who appeared to be about 12 years old. He was black with short hair and he was standing next to an old bike holding his helmet. He was wearing khaki pants and a red polo shirt with a grocery store logo on it. He wasn't filming anything or looking around like he was casing the property. He was just standing there waiting, patiently for an answer. Margaret made a decision that went against every security protocol and every instinct that told her to protect her daughter from more disappointment. "Let him in," she said. Carlos looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "No," Margaret admitted. "But do it anyway." She watched on the camera as Carlos spoke into the intercom and the gate swung open. The boy walked his bike through and followed Carlos up the long driveway toward the house. Margaret went to the front door to meet them. The boy looked nervous when he saw her standing there. Up close she could see he was thin and his clothes were clean but worn. His sneakers had holes in them and his bike was old and rusty. But his eyes were kind and he had a shy smile. "Hello, ma'am," he said politely. "My name is Marcus Johnson. I'm sorry to bother you, but I saw the party decorations from the street and I noticed there was just one girl sitting alone. I thought maybe she could use some company. Is this her birthday?" Margaret studied him for a long moment, trying to figure out his angle. But she couldn't detect any cruelty or mockery in his expression. He just seemed like a kid who had seen another kid looking sad and wanted to help. "It's her 10th birthday," Margaret said finally. "And you're right. She's alone because no one else came." Marcus's face fell. "That's terrible. Why wouldn't anyone come?" "Because she's in a wheelchair," Margaret said bluntly, watching for his reaction. "She was in an accident 3 years ago and now the other kids don't want to be around her." Marcus looked genuinely shocked. "That's the dumbest reason I ever heard to not go to a party. Is she mean or something?" Despite everything, Margaret felt a smile tug at her lips. "No, she's the kindest person I know." "Then they're all idiots," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Can I meet her? I promise I'm not weird or anything. I just hate seeing people left out." "I know what that feels like." Margaret made her decision. "Come with me." She led Marcus through the house to the ballroom. Lily looked up when they entered and her eyes went wide with surprise when she saw a strange boy following her mother. "Lily," Margaret said, "this is Marcus. He was passing by and asked if he could join your party. Would that be okay with you?" Lily looked at Marcus uncertainly. She had been disappointed so many times and Margaret could see her trying to protect herself from hoping this might be real. Marcus walked over to her table and sat down in the chair next to her wheelchair. "Happy birthday," he said with a genuine smile. "I'm sorry I don't have a present. I didn't know I was coming to a party today. But if you want, I can try to juggle with those cupcakes over there. I'll probably drop them, but it might be funny." Lily stared at him for a moment and then suddenly she laughed. It was a real laugh, not the forced ones she had been giving all day. "You'll get frosting everywhere," she said. "Yeah, probably," Marcus agreed. "Your mom might get mad at me. But it's your birthday, so you get to decide if it's worth the risk." Lily looked at her mother, who just shrugged. Then she looked back at Marcus and made her decision. "Okay," she said, "but start with just one cupcake." "Let's see how bad you are first." Marcus grinned and got up to grab a cupcake. Margaret stepped back and watched as this strange boy who had appeared out of nowhere started attempting to juggle with baked goods. He was terrible at it, just like he had warned, and the cupcake went flying across the room, splattering frosting on one of the decorative balloon arches. Lily laughed so hard she had tears running down her face. Margaret pulled out her phone and quietly told Carlos to stand down. Whatever this was, it wasn't a threat. It was something else entirely. Something that looked a lot like hope. Marcus stayed for 3 hours, and in that time, Margaret watched her daughter transform back into the happy child she used to be. The two kids moved from the ballroom to the game room, where Marcus pushed Lily's wheelchair as they raced from one arcade machine to another. They argued about which superhero was the strongest and whether pizza was better than burgers. They played video games, and Marcus never once commented on the adaptive controllers that Lily used or treated her like she was fragile. When they went outside to see the petting zoo animals, Marcus made up funny voices for each one and had Lily laughing so hard she could barely breathe. He asked her questions about her life and actually listened to the answers. He told her about his job at the grocery store and his grandmother who raised him. He was open and honest and treated her like a regular person, not someone to be pitied. Margaret kept her distance but stayed close enough to observe. She was still waiting for the other shoe to drop for Marcus to reveal some ulterior motive or show his true colors. But as the afternoon went on, she started to believe that maybe he was exactly what he appeared to be, which was a genuinely kind kid who had seen someone who needed a friend. Around 5 o'clock, Marcus checked his watch and his face fell. "I have to go," he said to Lily. "My grandma gets worried if I'm late and I still have to bike home." Lily's face showed disappointment. "Where do you live?" "Other side of town," Marcus said, "near Oak Street. It takes about 40 minutes on my bike." Margaret stepped forward. That was not a good neighborhood, especially not for a kid on a bike as it got dark. "I can have my driver take you home," she offered. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "That's okay, I bike everywhere, I'm used to it." "I insist," Margaret said in a tone that made it clear this wasn't up for debate. "You've been incredibly kind to my daughter today. It's the least I can do." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he also looked tired. "Okay, thank you." "Can Marcus come back?" Lily asked suddenly, looking at her mother with pleading eyes. "Can he visit again?" Margaret looked at Marcus, who seemed surprised by the question. "Would you want to?" she asked him. "Yeah, definitely," Marcus said with a smile. "If that's okay with you. Lily is cool. We were just getting to the good part of our debate about whether dinosaurs could beat dragons in a fight." "Dinosaurs would totally win," Lily said firmly. "Not if the dragons have fire breath," Marcus countered. "Dinosaurs have better strategy." Margaret listened to them argue as she led them to the garage where her driver was already waiting with one of the cars. She had him load Marcus's bike into the trunk and watched as the two kids exchanged phone numbers, with Lily giving Marcus her cell number that she rarely used because she had no one to call. Before Marcus got in the car, he turned to Lily. "Happy birthday for real, I'm glad I stopped by, today was fun." "It was the best birthday ever," Lily said, and Margaret could tell she meant it. "Thank you for coming." After Marcus left with the driver, Margaret wheeled Lily back inside. Her daughter was exhausted but happy in a way Margaret hadn't seen in years. As they got ready for bed that night, Lily talked nonstop about Marcus and all the things they had discussed. She made Margaret promise to let him visit again. Margaret promised, but privately she had doubts. Marcus seemed like a good kid, but he was also a stranger. She knew nothing about his background or his family. She had been careless today, letting him in on impulse. She needed to be more careful, especially where her daughter was concerned. The next morning, Margaret had her assistant run a background check on Marcus Johnson. She felt guilty about it, but she needed to protect Lily. The report came back clean. Marcus was 12 years old and lived with his grandmother, Patricia Johnson, in a small apartment on the east side. His parents had died when he was 7 in a house fire. He attended public school where he had good grades and no disciplinary issues. He had been working part-time at the grocery store for 6 months. The report also included financial information that made Margaret's heart ache. Patricia Johnson worked as a nurse at a free clinic, but had been dealing with health issues that limited her hours. They were barely making ends meet. Marcus's job at the grocery store wasn't just for spending money. It was helping to keep them afloat. 2 days after the party, Margaret's phone rang and she saw it was Lily calling from her cell. "Mom, Marcus just texted me. Can he come over today after his shift, please?" Margaret hesitated. She had been planning to have a conversation with Lily about being cautious about new friendships. But she could hear the excitement in her daughter's voice and she didn't have the heart to crush it. "Okay," she said. "Tell him I'll have Carlos pick him up from work so he doesn't have to bike all the way here." That afternoon, Marcus arrived and Margaret met him at the door. She had decided she needed to set some ground rules and make sure he understood the situation. "Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute before you go see Lily?" she asked. He looked nervous but nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret led him to her office and gestured for him to sit. He perched on the edge of the chair, looking small in the large leather seat. "I want to thank you again for what you did at the party," Margaret began. "You made my daughter very happy. But I need to be honest with you. Lily has been through a lot and she's been hurt by people who said they were her friends and then abandoned her. I can't let that happen again." Marcus nodded seriously. I understand. I won't hurt her, I promise. I hope that's true, Margaret said. But I need you to understand that if you're going to be part of Lily's life, you can't just disappear. You can't be her friend for a few weeks and then decide it's not fun anymore. She's had enough of that. I won't do that, Marcus said firmly. I know what it's like to be left behind. When my parents died, a lot of people who said they cared about us just stopped coming around. They didn't know what to say or how to help, so they just disappeared. It hurt my grandma a lot, and it hurt me too. I would never do that to someone else. Margaret studied his face and saw nothing but sincerity. She wanted to believe him, but she had been disappointed too many times. Okay, she said finally. You're welcome to visit Lily as often as you want. But I'm going to be watching, and if I see any sign that this is becoming harmful to her, I will end it immediately. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, Marcus said. I really do like Lily, though. She's smart and funny. We like the same kinds of stuff. I'm not just being nice because I feel sorry for her. That statement made Margaret pause. You don't feel sorry for her? Marcus looked confused. Why would I? She's in a wheelchair, but that doesn't make her sad or broken. She's just Lily. She can't walk, but she can do lots of other stuff. Yesterday she beat me at like 5 different video games, and she knows way more about books than I do. The wheelchair is just how she gets around. Margaret felt something tighten in her chest. This 12-year-old boy understood something that most adults couldn't grasp. Lily wasn't defined by her disability. She was defined by who she was as a person. You can go see her now, Margaret said quietly. She's in the library. Marcus stood up. Thank you, Miss Holland, and I meant what I said. I won't hurt her. Margaret watched him leave and then sat alone in her office for a long time thinking. She had spent 3 years trying to protect Lily from a world that saw her as less than. But maybe what Lily needed wasn't protection. Maybe what she needed was someone who saw her as exactly enough. Over the next 2 months, Marcus became a constant presence in the Holland household. He would arrive 3 or 4 times a week after school or work and spend hours with Lily. Sometimes they would do homework together at the kitchen table. Other times they would watch movies or play games or just talk about whatever was on their minds. Margaret found herself looking forward to his visits, almost as much as Lily did, because the house felt more alive when he was there. Margaret started to learn more about Marcus through observation and occasional conversations. He was incredibly bright with a natural curiosity about how things worked. One afternoon, she found him in the garage examining her electric car and asking the maintenance staff detailed questions about the battery system and charging mechanism. Another time, she overheard him explaining quantum physics concepts to Lily, using examples from their favorite comic books. His understanding was impressive, especially considering the limited resources at his underfunded public school. Marcus was also unfailingly polite and hardworking. He never asked for anything and always offered to help, whether it was clearing dishes after dinner or helping Lily organize her bookshelf. He treated the household staff with respect and learned everyone's names within the first week. The cook started making extra portions of dinner on nights when Marcus was there because she noticed he was always hungry. He would eat gratefully but never asked for seconds until they were offered. Lily was happier than Margaret had seen her in years. She smiled more and laughed more. She started caring about things again, like what she wore and how she styled her hair. She was reading more challenging books because she wanted to discuss them with Marcus. She practiced her piano more because she wanted to play him the new song she was learning. She was becoming herself again. But Margaret also noticed that the transformation wasn't one-sided. Marcus was changing too. He started speaking up more and seemed more confident. He talked about his dreams for the future with excitement instead of the careful resignation he had shown at first. He mentioned that he wanted to be an engineer someday and design things that could help people. Lily had told him he would be great at it, and he had started to believe her. One evening in late summer, Margaret came home early from work to find Marcus and Lily in the library surrounded by papers and books. They were working on what appeared to be some kind of science project. What are you two building? Margaret asked. Lily's face lit up. Marcus had an idea for making my wheelchair better. He's designing a modification that would let me reach higher shelves without asking for help. Marcus looked embarrassed. It's just a simple mechanical arm attachment. Nothing fancy. I drew up some plans, but I don't have the tools or materials to actually build it. Margaret looked at the detailed sketches spread across the table. The designs were sophisticated with precise measurements and multiple angles. This wasn't the work of someone just playing around. This was real engineering. "Where did you learn to do this?" Margaret asked. Marcus shrugged. "I just like figuring out how things work. I watch videos online and read articles. My grandma got me a book about engineering from the library for my birthday last year, and I've been teaching myself from that." Margaret picked up one of the sketches and studied it more carefully. The design was actually quite clever. It addressed a real problem with an elegant solution. "Marcus, would you be interested in interning at my company? We have an engineering department that designs assistive technology devices. I think they could use someone with your perspective and you could learn a lot from them." Marcus's eyes went wide. "Really? But I'm only 12. Don't you have to be older to work at a real company?" "Usually yes," Margaret admitted. "But I'm the CEO, so I can make exceptions. It would just be a few hours a week during the summer and you'd be paid. Think of it as an apprenticeship." Marcus looked torn between excitement and something else. "I already have my job at the grocery store. My grandma needs that money." Margaret had been expecting this. "What if I paid you more than the grocery store does? Enough that you could quit that job and work for me instead. The hours would be better and the work would be more relevant to your interests." "I don't know," Marcus said hesitantly. "That seems like too much. You're already letting me come over here all the time." Lily grabbed his arm. "Marcus, you have to do it. You're always talking about wanting to learn more about engineering, and this is the perfect chance. Plus, you'd be helping design things that actually matter." Margaret could see Marcus wavering. "Think about it," she said. "Talk to your grandmother. There's no pressure, but the offer is genuine. I'm not doing this as charity. I'm doing it because you're talented and I could use someone on my team who understands what users actually need." That night after Marcus left, Margaret found herself thinking about the conversation. She had made the offer impulsively, but she realized it was exactly what she should have done. Marcus had potential that was being wasted bagging groceries. He deserved opportunities that matched his abilities. And if she was being honest with herself, she had started to care about him, not just as Lily's friend, but as a person in his own right. The next day, Marcus called her office. His grandmother had agreed to let him take the internship. She had actually cried when he told her about the offer, because she had been worrying about how to pay for Marcus to go to college someday. This job would help him build skills and connections that could change his future. Marcus started at Holland Technologies the following week. Margaret personally introduced him to the head of the Assistive Technology Division, who was initially skeptical about having a 12-year-old intern. But after seeing Marcus's designs for Lily's wheelchair modification, the engineer's attitude changed completely. Within 2 weeks, they had built a prototype based on Marcus's plans, and it worked perfectly. Lily loved her new wheelchair attachment. More importantly, she loved that her best friend had designed it specifically for her. She started telling everyone about Marcus's invention and how smart he was. Margaret watched her daughter beam with pride every time she talked about him. As summer turned to fall, Margaret began to worry about the upcoming school year. Lily would be going back to Westbrook Academy, where she would once again face the children who had excluded her. Marcus would be going back to his public school across town. They wouldn't be able to see each other as often, and Margaret worried about how Lily would handle it. One evening, she sat down with both kids to discuss the situation. "I've been thinking about next school year," she said. "Lily, you'll be going into 5th grade, and Marcus, you'll be in 7th. Have either of you thought about how things will change when school starts?" Lily's face fell. "I don't want to think about it. School is terrible without Marcus." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I'll still visit on weekends, and we can text during the day." Margaret took a deep breath. She had been considering this idea for weeks, but she wanted to make sure she presented it correctly. "Marcus, I have a proposition for you. What would you think about transferring to Westbrook Academy? I would cover the tuition as part of your internship package. You'd be in the middle school division, so you wouldn't be in the same building as Lily, but you'd be on the same campus." Marcus stared at her. "That's one of the best private schools in the state. I could never afford to go there." "You wouldn't have to afford it," Margaret said. "Consider it a scholarship. You're brilliant and you deserve access to better educational resources than your current school can provide. Westbrook has advanced science and math programs that would challenge you. They have a robotics club and an engineering track. It's the kind of environment where you could really thrive." But everyone there is rich, Marcus said quietly. I wouldn't fit in. Lily reached over and took his hand. I don't fit in either. We cannot fit in together. Marcus looked at Lily and then at Margaret. Can I talk to my grandma first? Of course, Margaret said. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need. 3 days later, Marcus told her that his grandmother had said yes. Patricia had been hesitant at first, worried that Marcus would lose himself trying to fit into a world where he didn't belong. But Marcus had convinced her that he wasn't doing this to fit in. He was doing it to get an education that could change his life. And he was doing it so he could be there for Lily, who needed a friend more than anyone he had ever met. The news of Marcus's enrollment at Westbrook Academy spread through Margaret's social circles like wildfire. She first heard about it at a charity gala 3 weeks before school started, when Catherine Palmer approached, her with a tight smile and false concern in her. Boy, said Margaret, darling, I heard the most interesting rumor. Catherine said, holding her wine glass like a weapon. Someone said you're sponsoring a scholarship student at Westbrook this year. A boy from the East Side? Margaret kept her expression neutral. That's correct. His name is Marcus Johnson, and he's an exceptionally bright young man. Catherine's smile grew sharper. How progressive of you. Though I have to wonder if Westbrook is really the right environment for that kind of student. The academic standards are quite rigorous, and the culture can be challenging for outsiders. What Catherine meant but didn't say was that Marcus was black and poor and didn't belong at their exclusive school. Margaret felt anger rise in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Marcus will do just fine, Margaret said coolly. He's already working as an intern at my company, and his designs have impressed my senior engineers. I have no doubt he'll exceed the academic standards at Westbrook. I'm sure he's very capable, Catherine said in a tone that suggested she thought the opposite. I'm just concerned about Lily. You know how children can be. The other students might think it's odd that she's so close with the scholarship student. It could make her social situation even more difficult. Margaret set down her own glass because she no longer trusted herself not to throw it. Catherine, let me be very clear. Marcus is Lily's friend and the best thing that has happened to her in years. If the other students have a problem with that, then they're welcome to continue excluding her. We've managed just fine without them. Catherine's mask slipped for just a moment, showing genuine surprise. Well, I was only trying to help. No, you weren't, Margaret said quietly. You were trying to make sure that boy knows he doesn't belong. But here's what you don't understand. Marcus already belongs more than any of your children do because he earned his place. He didn't get into Westbrook because his parents donated a building. He got in because he's brilliant and kind and exactly the type of student that school should want. Margaret walked away from Catherine without waiting for a response. She was done playing nice with people who couldn't see value in anyone who didn't look like them or come from their world. But the conversation at the gala was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Margaret received calls from several board members at her company, expressing concerns about her decision to bring Marcus into the organization. They wrapped their objections in corporate language about liability and protocol, but Margaret heard what they really meant. They didn't want a poor black kid from the East Side having access to their world. One board member named Gregory Hayes was particularly vocal. He called Margaret at home one evening and didn't bother with pleasantries. I'm hearing disturbing things about your judgment lately, Margaret, he said. This situation with the Johnson boy has people worried. What people? Margaret asked coldly. Investors, other board members. The scholarship to Westbrook is your personal business, but bringing him into the company as an intern raises questions. He's 12 years old. He has no credentials. It looks like nepotism, or worse, like you're using company resources for some kind of social experiment. Margaret felt her temper flare. Marcus Johnson is the most naturally gifted engineer I've encountered in years. He designed a functioning assistive technology device in my library, using nothing but sketches and basic principles he taught himself. When my engineering team saw his work, they immediately wanted to hire him. This has nothing to do with social experiments and everything to do with recognizing talent. He's also your daughter's only friend, Gregory said. That creates a complicated dynamic. What happens when he gets tired of the arrangement? What happens when he realizes he can leverage your need to keep your daughter happy? Marcus isn't like that, Margaret said. You've known him for 3 months, Gregory countered. You don't actually know what he's like. You're a brilliant businesswoman, Margaret, but you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. You're vulnerable right now because of your daughter's situation, and this boy showed up at exactly the right time. Don't you think that's convenient? Margaret ended the call without saying goodbye. She sat in her dark office feeling shaken. Was Gregory right? Was she being manipulated? Had she let her desperation to help Lily make her blind to warning signs? But then she thought about Marcus. She thought about how he had shown up to that party with nothing, expecting nothing. She thought about how he treated Lily like a regular person instead of a charity case. She thought about his designs and his curiosity and the way he listened when people talked. She thought about how he had been hesitant to accept every single thing she had offered him. No, Gregory was wrong. Marcus was genuine, and if the board members and investors and society parents couldn't see that, then that was their problem, not hers. The next day, Margaret called an emergency board meeting. She stood at the head of the conference table and looked at the faces of the people who thought they could question her decisions. "I've heard the concerns about Marcus Johnson," she said without preamble. "Let me address them directly. Marcus is interning in our assistive technology division, where he has already contributed a successful design that we're planning to patent. He will continue working with us because he has value to offer. If anyone has a problem with that, they're welcome to register a formal complaint and I will respond in writing." "Margaret, be reasonable," Gregory started. She cut him off. "I am being reasonable. What's unreasonable is the suggestion that a talented young person should be denied opportunities because of his age or his background. We claim to value innovation and fresh perspectives, but apparently, that only applies when those perspectives come from people who look like us and went to the right schools. This isn't about race," another board member said, "isn't it?" Margaret challenged. "Because I don't recall this level of scrutiny when we hired the college-age son of one of our investors as a summer intern last year. He spent 3 months playing golf and producing nothing of value, but no one questioned that decision." The room fell silent. Margaret pressed her advantage. "Here's the reality. I built this company from nothing while most of you were born into wealth and connections. I know talent when I see it regardless of packaging. Marcus Johnson has more potential in his 12-year-old brain than most of our entry-level engineers. I'm investing in that potential, and if that bothers you, then I suggest you examine why." After the meeting, Margaret felt exhausted but vindicated. She had drawn a line and made clear where she stood. Some people wouldn't like it, but she had stopped caring about their approval. That evening, she invited Marcus and his grandmother Patricia to dinner at the house. It was time for the adults to have an honest conversation about what they were building together. Patricia Johnson was a slight woman in her 60s with gray hair and tired eyes. She was dressed in her best outfit, which was still worn and outdated, but she carried herself with quiet dignity, and she looked Margaret directly in the eye when they shook hands. Over dinner, Margaret explained the resistance she had been facing and the criticisms that had been leveled at Marcus. She wanted Patricia to hear it from her so there would be no surprises. "I want you to know what you and Marcus are walking into," Margaret said. "Westbrook Academy has wealthy families who will look down on him. My company has board members who question his presence. There are people in my social circle who think I've lost my mind. It's not going to be easy." Patricia nodded slowly. "Do you regret your decision?" "Not for a second," Margaret said firmly. "But I need to know that you're prepared for this. Marcus is going to face prejudice and obstacles. People are going to make assumptions about him. They're going to expect him to fail. People have been expecting us to fail since the day my son and daughter-in-law died," Patricia said quietly. "When Marcus came to live with me, I was already struggling with my health and my finances. Everyone said I was too old and too sick to raise a child. They said he'd end up in foster care or worse, but we proved them wrong." She looked at Marcus, who was sitting quietly next to Lily at the other end of the table. "That boy has been working since he was old enough to push a broom because he wanted to help me. He never complained even when other kids his age were out playing. He studied hard even though his school barely had textbooks. He took care of me when I was too sick to take care of myself. He's already stronger than most adults I know." Patricia turned back to Margaret. "So yes, we're prepared. We've been fighting our whole lives. This is just a different kind of fight. And for the first time, we have someone fighting with us instead of against us." Margaret felt something shift in her chest. She reached across the table and took Patricia's hand. "Then let's show them what we're made of." The first day of school arrived with a mixture of excitement and dread. Lily was going into 5th grade in the elementary building, while Marcus was starting 7th grade in the middle school section. They wouldn't see each other much during the day, but knowing he was somewhere on campus made Lily feel braver than she. had felt in years. Margaret drove them both to school that morning because she wanted to be there for their arrival. She had dressed in one of her power suits because she knew there would be parents watching and judging. She wanted them to see that she stood behind her decisions. The drop-off area was crowded with expensive cars and perfectly dressed children. Parents clustered in small groups catching up after the summer. Margaret noticed several of them staring as she helped Lily out of the car and into her wheelchair. Then Marcus got out carrying his new backpack and the stares intensified. "Are you ready?" Margaret asked quietly. Marcus nodded, though she could see tension in his shoulders. "I've got this." Lily reached up and grabbed his hand. "We've got this," she corrected. Margaret watched them head toward their respective buildings. Marcus walked with Lily to the elementary entrance first, making sure she got inside safely before heading to his own building. Several students watched them with undisguised curiosity. Margaret saw Catherine Palmer standing near the entrance, and the woman's expression was cold disapproval. The first few weeks were brutal in ways Margaret hadn't fully anticipated. The other children in Lily's class were overtly hostile. They had ignored her before, but now they seemed actively resentful. They made comments about her special treatment and suggested that the only reason Marcus was at the school was because Lily's mom was rich. They excluded her from group projects and whispered when she entered rooms. Marcus faced different but equally painful challenges. As one of the only scholarship students and one of very few black students in the middle school, he stood out in every way. The other kids didn't know how to categorize him. He was too smart to dismiss, but too different to accept. His teachers were surprised by his abilities, which only highlighted their low expectations. One of his classmates, named Kyle Bennett, seemed to make it his personal mission to make Marcus miserable. Kyle came from old money and had attended Westbrook since kindergarten. He made comments about Marcus's clothes and his neighborhood. He questioned whether Marcus had really earned his spot or if it was just affirmative action. His friends laughed at his jokes, and Marcus had to endure it day after day. Marcus never complained to Margaret or Lily about what he was experiencing. He came to the Holland house after school and did his homework and talked about his classes like everything was fine. But Margaret could see the strain. He was quieter than usual, and he had stopped talking about his dreams for the future. Lily was more open about her struggles. She came home crying several times in the first month, reporting that girls in her class had formed a club and explicitly told her she couldn't join because she was friends with the charity case. Another time, she overheard her teacher telling another teacher that it was inappropriate for Margaret to force the school to accept students who didn't meet their standards. "They're talking about Marcus," Lily said through tears. "They think he doesn't belong here, and they think it's my fault." Margaret held her daughter and felt rage building inside her. She wanted to march into that school and demand consequences for every child and adult who had made her daughter and Marcus feel less than, but she knew that would only make things worse. Instead, she called a meeting with the principal. The principal was a man named George Crawford who had been at Westbrook for 20 years. He listened to Margaret's concerns with practiced sympathy, but she could tell he didn't really care. "Children can be cruel," he said with a dismissive shrug. "They're adjusting to changes in their community. These things take time." "These things take leadership," Margaret countered. "Your teachers are making discriminatory comments. Your students are engaging in bullying. This isn't about adjustment. This is about the culture you've created here." Crawford's expression hardened. "Ms. Holland, I understand you're protective of your daughter and your scholarship student. But Westbrook has maintained its excellence for over a century. We have standards and traditions. Perhaps the issue isn't with our school, but with whether this environment is the right fit." Margaret felt ice in her veins. "Are you suggesting my daughter and Marcus should leave?" "I'm suggesting that not everyone thrives in an environment that demands a certain level of social sophistication," Crawford said carefully. "Your daughter has special needs that our school accommodates, but she may be happier somewhere with more students like her. And Marcus is clearly struggling to integrate. It might be kinder to acknowledge that this experiment hasn't worked." Margaret stood up. "This conversation is over. But let me be clear about something. I donate significant money to this school every year. That donation comes with expectations. If I see any more evidence of discrimination or bullying from either students or staff, I will not only pull my funding, but I will make sure every family knows exactly why. I will make it public how your institution treats students who don't come from the right backgrounds." Crawford's face went pale. Margaret's donations funded several programs, and her public criticism would be devastating to the school's reputation. "That won't be necessary," Crawford said quickly. "I'll speak to the teachers and remind them of our anti-bullying policies." "See that you do," Margaret said and walked out. But speaking to teachers didn't change much. The bullying became more subtle, but it didn't stop. Marcus started getting bad grades on assignments that Margaret knew he had done well. Lily was left out of field trips because of supposed liability concerns with her wheelchair. The message was clear. Westbrook didn't want them there and would make their lives difficult until they left. One evening in October, Margaret found Marcus sitting alone in the library long after Lily had gone to bed. He was staring at a textbook but not really reading it. His face looked defeated in a way that broke her heart. "Marcus, what's wrong?" she asked, sitting down beside him. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here." "Don't say that," Margaret said firmly. "You're one of the brightest students in that school." "I'm different," Marcus said. "I'll always be different. Kyle and his friends will never accept me. The teachers will always expect less from me. I thought I could handle it, but it's exhausting pretending it doesn't hurt." Margaret chose her words carefully. "You're right that you're different. But different doesn't mean less. Those kids are intimidated by you because you have something they don't. You have resilience and character and real talent. They've had everything handed to them and they know deep down that they haven't earned it. You threaten that comfortable worldview." "It doesn't feel like I'm threatening anything," Marcus said. "It feels like I'm just the kid everyone wants to leave." "Not everyone," Margaret said. "Lily thinks you hung the moon. My engineering team thinks you're brilliant. I think you're one of the most remarkable young people I've ever met. The question isn't whether you belong. The question is whether Westbrook deserves to have you." Marcus looked at her with uncertain eyes. "What do you mean?" Margaret had been thinking about this for weeks. "I mean, we have options. You could go back to your old school, or we could look at other private schools that might be more welcoming, or you could stick it out here and prove everyone wrong. But it has to be your choice. I won't force you to stay somewhere that makes you miserable." Marcus thought about that for a long time. Finally he said, "I want to stay. Not because of the school, but because of Lily. She needs me here, and I need to prove to myself that I can do this. I'm tired of running away from hard things." Margaret felt pride swell in her chest. "Okay, then we stay and we fight. But you need to promise me something. If it gets too hard, if it starts affecting your health or your happiness, you tell me. There's no shame in knowing when to walk away." "I promise," Marcus said. But Margaret knew he wouldn't keep that promise. Marcus had too much pride and too much determination. He would endure whatever Westbrook threw at him, because that's the kind of person he was. She just hoped it wouldn't break him in the process. Winter arrived early that year, bringing snow and cold that seemed to match the chill in the social atmosphere at Westbrook. Marcus had survived 3 months at the school through sheer determination, but Margaret could see the toll it was taking. He was thinner than when he had started, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He still maintained his grades and his work at the company, but the light that had made him special seemed dimmer. Then in February, everything got worse. Margaret received a call at work from Marcus's grandmother, Patricia. The moment she heard the older woman's voice, she knew something was terribly wrong. "Margaret, I'm at the hospital," Patricia said, and her voice was shaking. "I collapsed at work today. They're running tests, but the doctors think it might be my heart." Margaret felt her own heart drop. "Where's Marcus?" "He's still at school. He doesn't know yet. I didn't want to scare him until I knew more. But Margaret, I'm worried. If something happens to me, if I can't work anymore, I don't know how we'll manage. The medical bills alone will be thousands of dollars, even with insurance." "Don't worry about that right now," Margaret said immediately. "Focus on getting better. I'll pick Marcus up from school and bring him to the hospital. And Patricia, whatever you need, we'll figure it out. You're not alone." Margaret left work immediately and drove to Westbrook. She found Marcus in the library working on homework. When he saw her standing in the doorway, his face registered confusion and then fear. "What's wrong?" he asked, standing up quickly. "Is it Lily?" "No, sweetheart. It's your grandmother. She's in the hospital. She's okay, but the doctors want to run some tests. I'm going to take you to see her." Marcus went very still and very pale. "Is she going to die?" Margaret's heart broke. "No, she's going to be fine. But she needs you right now." The drive to the hospital was silent. Marcus stared out the window with his jaw clenched. Margaret recognized the look on his face because she had seen it on Lily after the accident. It was the look of someone trying not to fall apart. At the hospital, they found Patricia in a bed in the cardiac unit hooked up to monitors. She looked small and fragile in the hospital gown. When she saw Marcus, her eyes filled with tears. "Hey, baby," she said softly. "I'm okay. Don't look so scared." Marcus went to her bedside and took her hand. "What happened?" "My heart decided to act up," Patricia said, trying to smile. "The doctors say I need to rest and probably need some medication. Nothing I can't handle." But Margaret had spoken to the doctors in the hallway. Patricia's condition was serious. She had an irregular heartbeat and dangerously high blood pressure. She would need extensive treatment and months of recovery. She couldn't work and would need help with daily tasks. The medical bills would be substantial. Over the next week, the situation became clearer and more dire. Patricia was released from the hospital, but she was weak and in pain. Marcus moved between school and the hospital and home, trying to take care of everything. He was missing classes to attend doctor appointments with his grandmother. He was working extra hours at the company to try to save money. He stopped coming to the Holland house completely. Lily was devastated by Marcus's absence. She didn't understand why he had disappeared so suddenly. Margaret tried to explain that he was dealing with family problems, but Lily took it personally. She thought he had gotten tired of being her friend, just like everyone had warned. Margaret watched both children suffering and felt helpless. She had money and resources, but she couldn't fix this without potentially making Marcus feel like charity. She knew how proud he and his grandmother were. They wouldn't accept help that felt like pity. One evening, Margaret sat down with Lily and had a difficult conversation. Marcus's grandmother is sick and they're dealing with a lot right now. Marcus is trying to take care of everything himself because that's the kind of person he is. But I think he needs help even if he won't ask for it. "What kind of help?" Lily asked. "Financial help? Medical help? Someone to make sure they don't lose everything trying to get through this crisis." Margaret paused. "But if I just offer money, Marcus's grandmother might refuse because she doesn't want to feel like she owes us. So I need to think of a way to help that doesn't hurt their pride." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What if you made it official? Like, what if you made Patricia part of our family somehow so it's not charity? Isn't that what families do? They help each other." Margaret looked at her daughter with new appreciation. "That's actually a really good idea." The next day, Margaret went to visit Patricia at her apartment. The place was small and worn but clean. Patricia was resting on the couch looking exhausted. Marcus was at school, so it was just the two women. "Patricia, I'm going to be direct," Margaret said, sitting down. "You need help and I want to provide it. But I know you're too proud to accept charity, so I have a proposal." Patricia looked wary. "What kind of proposal?" "Marcus has been working at my company and he's become valuable to us. But he's also still a child who needs stability and support. I'd like to establish a formal scholarship program through my company that would cover his education and provide family benefits. That would include health insurance for you both and a stipend for living expenses. It would be presented as part of his employment package, not as charity." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Margaret, that's too much." "It's not enough," Margaret said firmly. "Patricia, you've raised an extraordinary young man despite incredible hardship. You've given him values and character that money can't buy. He's changed my daughter's life and by extension my life. Helping you isn't charity. It's recognizing the value you've both brought to our lives." "I don't know what to say," Patricia said quietly. "Say yes," Margaret said. "Let me do this. Not because you need rescuing, but because we're stronger together than apart. Marcus is part of my family now, whether there's paperwork that says so or not. That makes you family too." Patricia wiped her eyes. "He talks about Lily all the time, about how smart she is and how brave. He feels like he finally found someone who understands him. I think you saved him as much as he saved Lily." "Then let's keep saving each other," Margaret said. Patricia agreed to the arrangement, and Margaret immediately put everything in motion. She established the scholarship program through her company, making it official and legitimate. She added Patricia and Marcus to her company's premium health insurance plan. She arranged for a home health aide to check on Patricia daily and help with household tasks during her recovery. She set up a direct deposit for a monthly stipend that would cover their rent and expenses. When Marcus found out, he was overwhelmed. He came to Margaret's office after school one day with tears in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "We can't ever pay you back." Margaret came around her desk and put her hands on his shoulders. Marcus, do you remember the day you showed up at Lily's party? You didn't know us. You had nothing to gain, but you saw a lonely girl and you chose kindness. You gave my daughter something I couldn't give her with all my money and power. You gave her friendship and acceptance and joy. This isn't about paying back. This is about taking care of family. But I'm not your family, Marcus said. Yes, you are, Margaret said firmly. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. You're the brother Lily never had. You're the son I would be proud to claim. Family isn't just about biology. It's about who shows up when it matters. You showed up for us. Now let us show up for you. Marcus hugged her then, and Margaret held him while he cried. She realized this might be the first time in years that someone had told him it was okay to not be strong all the time. He had been carrying so much for so long. He deserved to put that burden down. Over the following weeks, Patricia's health improved with proper treatment and rest. Marcus started coming back to the Holland house after school. Lily was overjoyed to have her best friend back. The two of them would do homework together and talk about their days, and things slowly started feeling normal again. But the crisis had changed something. The relationship between the Hollands and the Johnsons had deepened. They weren't just friends anymore. They were family in the truest sense, bound not by obligation, but by mutual love and respect and the choice to stand together through hard times. 2 years passed, and the landscape of their lives had transformed in ways none of them could have predicted that day, when Marcus first rang the doorbell. It was now the spring of Lily's 12th birthday, and Margaret stood in the ballroom watching the decorating staff prepare for another party. But this time everything was different. The guest list included 30 children from Westbrook and several from the public school Marcus had attended before. There were kids of different races and backgrounds and economic levels. Some arrived in expensive cars with drivers, and others came on bikes or were dropped off by parents in old sedans. None of that mattered anymore because Lily and Marcus had built something that transcended those divisions. It had started small. A few kids at Westbrook had noticed that Marcus and Lily didn't care about the social hierarchies that everyone else obsessed over. They saw how Marcus helped other students with homework without judgment, and how Lily was kind to everyone, even those who had been cruel to her. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, other kids who felt like outsiders started gravitating toward them. There was Sophie, who had just moved from another state and didn't know anyone. There was Danny, who was being bullied for being overweight. There was Chen, who struggled with English as his second language. One by one, these kids found acceptance with Lily and Marcus. And as the group grew, it became its own social force. They weren't the popular kids, but they were the kind kids, and that turned out to matter more. The transformation hadn't been easy. Kyle Bennett and his friends still made snide comments, and the social elite at Westbrook still looked down on the scholarship students. But their power had diminished because Marcus and Lily had proved that you didn't need their approval to be happy. They had created their own community based on different values. The teachers had changed too. Once they saw Marcus's consistent excellence, they could no longer justify their low expectations. He had finished 7th grade at the top of his class and 8th grade even higher. His work at Holland Technologies had resulted in 2 patents with his name on them. He was only 14, but he was already being recruited by college programs. The school could no longer deny his brilliance, so they had started claiming credit for it instead. Margaret watched as guests started arriving for the party. She saw Marcus and Patricia pull up in the car Margaret had given them last year. Patricia looked healthy now, with color in her cheeks and energy in her step. The medication and reduced stress had worked wonders. She had even gone back to work part-time at the clinic doing what she loved. Marcus got out of the car wearing nice clothes that actually fit him properly. He had grown several inches in 2 years and filled out. He looked confident and happy. He waved at Margaret and headed inside to find Lily. Margaret followed him in and found Lily in her wheelchair surrounded by friends. She was laughing at something Sophie was saying. Her wheelchair now had multiple modifications that Marcus had designed, including the reaching arm and an upgraded motor system. But more than the physical changes, Lily had changed emotionally. She was confident and outgoing. She advocated for herself and others. She had recently started a club at school focused on accessibility issues, and it had attracted significant membership. When Lily saw Marcus, she wheeled over to him with a huge smile. "You're late." "Traffic," Marcus said, grinning. "Plus your mom made me wrap your present 3 times because I kept doing it wrong." "What did you get me?" Lily asked excitedly. "You'll see," Marcus said mysteriously. The party was everything a 12-year-old's birthday should be. There was music and games and laughter. The kids didn't separate into cliques. They all mixed together. Margaret saw wealthy kids playing video games with scholarship students. She saw able-bodied kids pushing wheelchairs so everyone could participate in relay races. She saw her daughter at the center of it all, happy and included and valued. When it was time for presents, Lily opened gifts from all her guests. But she saved Marcus's for last. When she finally unwrapped it, she found a leather-bound journal with her name embossed on the cover. "Open it," Marcus said. Inside the front cover was a note in Marcus's handwriting. It read, "For Lily, who showed me that friendship means showing up. This journal is for documenting all the adventures we're going to have. Consider this page 1. Lily hugged the journal to her chest with tears in her eyes. "It's perfect." After the party wound down and most of the guests had left, Marcus and Lily sat together in the library like they had countless times before. Margaret and Patricia joined them with coffee. "I can't believe it's been 2 years since that first party," Patricia said. "The one where Marcus crashed because he couldn't stand seeing Lily alone." "Best decision I ever made," Marcus said. "Even if it did lead to me having to go to Westbrook with all those snobby kids." "Hey, some of those snobby kids are my friends now," Lily protested. "Some of them," Marcus agreed. "The ones who figured out that being rich doesn't make you interesting. The rest are still pretty insufferable." Margaret laughed. "You two have changed that school whether they want to admit it or not. Principal Crawford told me enrollment applications from diverse families have tripled. They're having to actually consider whether their culture is welcoming, because families are asking hard questions." "Good," Lily said firmly. "They should have to think about that." Patricia looked at her grandson with pride. "I got your midterm report yesterday. Perfect grades again. Your teachers say you're the best student they've ever had." Marcus looked embarrassed. "They have to say nice things. Ms. Holland donates a lot of money." "They don't have to say you're the best," Margaret corrected. "That's earned. And speaking of which, I had a conversation with the Dean of Engineering at State University. They want to offer you early admission when you finish high school, full scholarship plus a research stipend." Marcus's eyes went wide. "Really? That's one of the top engineering programs in the country." "You deserve it," Margaret said. "Though I have to admit I'm going to miss having you around the company. You've become essential to our assistive technology division." "I'll still consult," Marcus said with a grin. "You can't get rid of me that easily." Lily grabbed his hand. "You better not go too far away for college. I'll need you to help me survive high school." "We'll survive it together," Marcus promised. "Just like everything else." Margaret watched the two of them and felt overwhelming gratitude for the day Marcus had stopped his bike and asked to join a lonely girls' party. That one act of spontaneous kindness had changed all of their lives in profound ways. She thought about the people who had criticized her for letting Marcus into their lives. The board members who questioned his value, the society parents who thought he didn't belong, the teachers who had low expectations. All of them had been wrong. Marcus hadn't taken anything from them. He had given them something precious, which was the opportunity to be better people. "I want to propose a toast," Margaret said, lifting her coffee cup. "To Marcus, who showed us that the most important things in life can't be bought or inherited. They have to be chosen. And to Lily, who had the wisdom to recognize a true friend when she saw one. And to all of us for having the courage to build something better than what we were given." They clinked their cups together. And in that moment, Margaret understood something fundamental. The story of how no one came to her daughter's birthday party had a happy ending, not because everything became perfect, but because they had learned what really mattered. It didn't matter that society still had prejudices, or that Westbrook still struggled with elitism, or that Lily still faced challenges because of her wheelchair. What mattered was that they faced those things together. What mattered was that Marcus had seen a lonely girl and chosen kindness. What mattered was that Lily had welcomed that kindness without suspicion. What mattered was that they had built a family based on choice rather than obligation. Years later, when Marcus and Lily graduated from high school as valedictorian and salutatorian respectively, the local newspaper wrote a feature story about their friendship. They called it an unlikely pairing. Margaret had laughed when she read that because there was nothing unlikely about it. When you stripped away all the superficial differences, what was left was two young people who saw each other clearly and chose to stand together. The article included a photo of Marcus pushing Lily's wheelchair. Across the graduation stage, both of them beaming with pride. In the background, you could see Margaret and Patricia standing together holding hands and crying happy tears. The caption read, "Family by choice." That phrase captured everything they had built. They weren't related by blood, but they were bound by something stronger, which was love and respect, and the daily decision to show up for each other. On Lily's graduation day, Marcus gave her another gift. It was the original sketch he had drawn that first summer for her wheelchair modification. He had it framed with a note that said, "This is where it started." The day I realized that the best thing I could design was a life where everyone belongs. Lily hung it in her dorm room when she went to college. She would look at it whenever things got hard and remember that she had a brother who would always show up for her. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Not because she was perfect, but because she was his friend.